Hello again, welcome back to FinTech Live New York 2024. We're back with our next interactive panel session. And this is FinTech Fraud and ID Verification. Now let's meet our panel. We are joined by Eric Hussey, SVP Chief Information Security Officer at Finastra. We're joined by Mark Turi, Managing Client Partner Customer Experience Practice at Verizon, and Marwan Semida, Senior Business Development Manager at Sumsub. Hi all of you, how are you?
Great, thank you for having us.
Yeah, very welcome.
We appreciate it.
Great to see you all. Thank you for joining us on this. And I think the biggest challenge we're going to have is fitting this into 40 minutes. So if you'll forgive me, let's crack on because we've got a huge amount to get through. I'll sort of come to each of you in turn, but of course feel free to jump in if you feel the need to do so. Where we're going to start is about evolving tactics, because this has been a big part of our conversation today already about the pace of change, about how things are changing. So how can financial institutions stay ahead of evolving fraud tactics? Eric, you are first on my list, so I'll come to you first. From your perspective, obviously with the more financial software hat on, how do you stay ahead?
Yeah, so I kind of boil it down into kind of two areas, right? From a tech perspective, new ways of customer authentication, and embedding advanced context from service providers and law enforcement is obviously crucial, right? We look to our service providers to help augment with intention where we need to address, I would say, emerging regulation and emerging concerns in the consumer side of our business. From an organizational risk governance perspective, if we look at our organizations, right, there's always a lot to do. I can't stress enough the value of doing threat-based risk assessments. We can't possibly cover our entire attack surface, but let's make sure we have the information on how negative consequences can be realized in the most sensitive parts of our business so we can mitigate those with intention and priority.
Mark, if we can come to you next, please.
Sure. So as one of those service providers who help large companies try to overcome this risk, it is vigilance, right? I think every day there's something new that comes out that somebody else has to solve for. So the way we try to coach our customers is to look at a layered approach. There's not a silver bullet that allows you to identify this is the one thing that's going to stop spoofing, or this is what's going to stop robocalling. So I think looking at a layered approach, we do a lot of things related to more voice fraud. So what are the things that happen on an inbound fraud? And what are the things that happen outbound that could hurt the reputation of the brand and the organization? So there are many different ways that we can harden the perimeter, look at the way things are coming into the organization, identify that it's fraud from a regulatory carrier-based solution, and then get into other technologies that would allow you to look at different factors as calls come in. And when they go outbound, how do we identify that this is really an outbound call from your organization and that someone should accept it? So there are many different layers to the approach.
Thank you, Mark. And speaking of many different layers, one of the things I love about getting these panel conversations together is you get different people from such different organisations, which adds different layers to the debate. So you see what I did there. Marwan, if we can come to you next at Sumsub, obviously from an ID verification software kind of point of view, very much your field of expertise this. How do you stay ahead? Go for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, as part of my job, I emphasize the importance of leveraging comprehensive KYC and AML solutions to stay ahead of evolving fraud tactics, right? So financial institutions, of course, should adopt a proactive approach by integrating a real-time identity verification and continuous transaction monitoring systems. Utilizing machine learning models helps institutions detect suspicious patterns and flag fraudulent activities early, right? Additionally, also staying informed about the latest fraud trends and continuously updated security measures are very crucial to the business. As also Eric mentioned, collaboration with industry partners and law enforcement agencies to share threat intelligence also play an essential role in staying ahead of the fraudulent activities.
Thank you, Marwan. Let's move on to AI next, which has been a key talking point of our whole event today so far. Mark, I'll start with you on this, about your thoughts on what role AI plays in fraud detection and prevention going forward. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, I would say, there's two sides to this coin. AI is one of the biggest challenges we have right now with the way bad actors are coming in and getting into organizations. But I think many organizations right now are trying to use AI and machine learning models to identify risky transactions, potentially identify, should we put a pause on this one and decide if we should look at it and identify it's actually real or fraudulent, and then identify what are the repetitive risky patterns that we're seeing and how can we avoid some of those patterns moving forward. So I think it's looking at it from how do I look at the macro level of things that this could be a valid interaction, and this may look questionable, so what should we do and get some human intervention before we allow the transaction to go through.
Yes, it's both offensive and defensive. That's the discussion here always when it comes to AI, when it comes to fraud and ID verification. Marwan, I'll come to you on that as well. AI, where do you think that plays a part in this picture?
I believe that artificial intelligence is integral to modern fraud detection and prevention strategies, right? For example, at Sumsub, we utilize AI to analyze vast amounts of data quickly and accurately as well. AI systems can identify fraud in real time, learning from each interaction to improve over time, right? This allows financial institutions not to only detect fraud more effectively, but also to reduce false positives, ensuring a smoother experience for customers. AI also can help in automating routine compliance tasks, allowing human experts to focus on more complex cases, which is something that we do currently.
Eric, same question on AI, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, I love these conversations because as security professionals, context is key, right? I think with the advancements in AI, all right, it's just the next step of how we continually evolve our conditional security practices against that evolving landscape. That includes, I would say, context that is historically known, but context that is yet not known and being continually discovered, and enables more of a real-time security posture for organizations. So context is key.
Absolutely. Let's move on to another key point here that I wanted to talk about, and that is biometrics. I think biometrics, as the consumer in the room, as I try to often be in these sort of scenarios, that's been one of the biggest things I've seen in terms of changes to how I have to interact with security. Not only does it let me into my apps, for example, but it also tells me if I needed more sleep when it doesn't recognize me first thing in the morning. But that's a separate issue. Let's move on to biometrics. How can biometric authentication really improve the identity verification processes? Marwan, I'll start with you on that. Do you think this is a really significant part of the picture of really improving things when it comes to fraud?
I believe so. I believe biometric authentication significantly enhances the security and efficiency of identity verification processes. I believe also that biometric solutions such as facial recognition should be embedded and integrated into the KYC processes. These technologies provide a higher level of security by providing a user physical characteristics, right, and identifying it, making sure of it, which are difficult to replicate or steal as well. Biometrics also streamline the user's experience by allowing quicker and more seamless verification compared to traditional methods. And this also has dual benefit of increased security and improved user convenience, makes biometrics a critical component of modern identity verification.
Absolutely. Eric Hussey at Finastra, if we can come to you next on that, please.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of, I would say, boil it down for me anyway, when I look at biometrics, enhanced security, speed and convenience, it's non-transferable typically, in high accuracy, right? There's been a lot of innovation in this space for a long time. It is now very, very consumable. So we should be looking for, I would say, new ways to integrate biometrics into more layers of authentication that each and every one of us goes through on a day-to-day basis to access what's important to us and our ability to conduct business and other life activities.
Thank you, Eric. Mark Turi, if we can come to you next on that, please.
Sure, thank you, Neil. So as we talked about with that layered approach, voice biometrics, facial recognition, device print, behavioral print, all these things are multi-layered ways that we can ensure that this is the actual individual you want to be talking to and creating the transaction with. So I think voice bio, facial are critical and key. They're 1,000 times more accurate than your fingerprint. So these are some of the areas that I think companies are just really starting to take advantage of, and they can use more and more in order to ensure that the transactions they're having are valid and they're not giving money to any of these fraudsters.
Absolutely. Let's move on to some more challenges here, because we've talked about a lot of exciting technology and ways that the industry can get ahead and stay ahead of the challenges. But let's stay with those challenges. Eric, I'll start with you again on this one. What do you see are the main and the key challenges that are faced by financial institutions, other tech companies in maintaining that secure identity verification system? So where are those key challenges?
Yeah, I think that as we look at more advanced technologies to help keep us secure, I think we need to also understand that the complexity of fraudulent activity and those schemes that are associated with that are much more difficult to detect and unravel forensically. So that is a key consideration. The more complex your system is, you would hope that it is more defensible, but the reality is that it's much more difficult to unwind things forensically when problems do erupt. So I would say that's a challenge. Regulatory compliance. There's a lot of emerging regulation around the world. But I see that as a challenge, but it's also a huge enabler for us, I would say, to be able to do the right thing, to help stay ahead, and to continue to funnel investments into those areas that are appropriate. That is one of I would say, the great advantages of working in a very regulated sector. And then lastly, I think that technology integration and customer experience go really hand in hand. Technology integration, how do we integrate these systems in these identity methods and biometric methods into our stacks, our application stacks, in a way where it makes our UX frictionless? That is absolutely key, because that is absolutely needed to keep the customer experience positive and keep the customer coming back and not feeling like it's a hurdle. So I think we've done a lot of great things in this space, and it's only getting better, right? So, but it's getting better because I think a lot of it's been because of our service providers. This is their core challenge, and their core business value they bring to the market is this is what they do. So they're ahead of it, they're best of breed, and we take from them and incorporate into how we make our value much more easily translatable and frictionless to the consumer.
Eric, I'm not sure if you can see my notes from where you are sitting right now, but I want to go on to compliance and regulations next. So let's keep that one just on hold for a second, because we will come back to that, because that's absolutely key. Mark, if I can come to you next on the question of challenges, those key challenges being faced in maintaining secure identity verification systems.
So Eric made a comment about technology and customer experience go hand in hand. I think employees also play a big role in that. So there is the technologies that we've talked a little bit about, but I also think it's internal training and internal vigilance with organizations. If you're getting into the organization to speak to someone in the contact center, for instance, their job is to try to help. But sometimes that helping opens up the door for further fraudulent activities by giving key information, maybe that would make it easier for a fraudster. So having ongoing internal trainings and just identifying where those gaps might be from the human element is really key as we continue to move forward beyond the technology.
Let's just stay with that human aspect for a second. Marwan, I will come to you on the challenges question there. But Mark, this has been, again, a repeat theme of our sessions today, how tech companies, or any kind of company we're talking about here, can have the most phenomenal set of technological solutions, particularly when it comes to security, running. But the wild card here is the consumer that has to use it. How do you actually go about trying to make sure they do their bit to make sure you get the best from all the technology that's in place?
Well, and I think we've talked about a few different applications and things. Are people coming in from the mobile app in the organization where they may already be pre-authenticated? I think it's just making people aware that, there's been a threefold uplift in fraudulent activities across tech in the financial business since halfway through 2022, right? So things are just really starting to accelerate, and making them aware, potentially notifying them that, hey, we're going to put a new voice biometric solution in, or as part of our mobile app, here's something we're going to do, or when you authenticate with our call center, or when you're talking to one of our advisors, these are just some of the things that are going to be happening to ensure that we know you're you and you're into a transaction with us that is authentic.
Absolutely. We are going to come back to sort of the education and consumers and customers in just a moment. We'll dig more into that in just a second. Marwan, if we can come to you next on the challenges question, those key challenges faced by financial institutions and other tech companies in maintaining secure identity verification systems. For you, what are those key challenges?
Well, I believe also that, as the gentleman here mentioned, the main challenge currently is actually keeping up with the rapidly evolving fraud tactics, right? And ensuring compliance with varying global regulations. Another significant challenge is balancing the security with user convenience, as well as Mark mentioned, and as Eric mentioned as well. Implementing robust verification process can sometimes lead to friction in the user experience. So, in my opinion, these challenges should be addressed by integrating flexible, customizable solutions that comply with international standards and are designed to minimize user inconvenience. Also, ensuring data privacy and protecting against sophisticated fraud attempts also requires continuous investment in technology and personal training. And I believe also the gentleman talked about this a lot now. Thank you very much.
Oh, Marwan, I'm going to pick up on something you say there. As you see, I get distracted very easily. You say something interesting and I'm off on a different direction. So I blame all of you entirely. The word you use there is friction, and the friction for the consumer experience. This is one I'll open up to all three of you. How do we get that balance right? Because the consumer wants a slick, easy, smart experience where they're not having to remember 16 different passwords and their mother's, uncle's maiden name's first pet's name, or whatever it is. They want a nice, easy experience. How do we balance the security with minimizing friction? Marwan, I'll start with you on that. How do we get that balance?
So, as Mark mentioned something very good, is keeping the customer aware always of the current regulations and how we overcome them. But something that we do actually at Sumsub always is actually during the verification process, no matter what we're doing actually, we're keeping always the customer informed and also informed with all the instructions needed to make the life cycle as smooth as possible. I would say also minimizing the steps of verification as much as we can do. This is going to be like a key to the customizable or the smooth verification of the life cycle of the user.
Thank you. Eric, same question, balancing the friction of the customer experience whilst maintaining security and getting that balance right.
Yeah, I mean, I think truthfully, it's a very simple answer, right? And it starts with each and every one of us as practitioners, right? And so one of the things I've always done throughout my career, especially in when I think about what it's like to be a CISO in a software company that ultimately serves thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of consumers, is you have to have a lot of empathy when you think about what security you're going to embed. How do you make it frictionless? And how do you drink your own champagne, so to speak, right? So I think it all starts with us on architecting, solutioning with customer empathy in mind. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, customer empathy, that is an absolutely key point there. And I'll come to you last on this. Mark, your thoughts on this, the balance of that friction whilst also maintaining security?
Well, I think we've all probably had family members who have been through something where someone said, we've got a problem with this relative and we need you to put $10 million in an account or whatever it is. I think there's some empathy But I also think constant communication with individuals. We're all consumers of other things rather than the organizations that we represent. So constant communication with our customers to say, hey, we're going to do this on your behalf, and these are the things that are going to make it safer and easier for you to do business. But we're going to add multi-factor authentication, and here's what we're going to do in order to make it more streamlined. We're also going to be asking that you do these following things in the application, so potentially you could pre-authenticate. You're going to do it once, we're going to repeat it multiple times down the road to make it easier for you. So I think communication is the #1 answer to that.
Thank you. Let's move on. I did promise to come back to regulation and compliance because I always can almost feel the knowing smiles coming through the screen from the audience whenever you bring up the subject of new regulations and staying up and on top of those. But let's look at it from a positive point of view here about how regulatory compliance can enhance fraud prevention efforts. Mark, we'll start with you on this. How do you feel that can happen? How being compliant with those regulations can enhance fraud prevention efforts?
I think it's critical, right? And I think we're getting more and more regulation, but regulation equals friction, right? So we have to be cautious on how we approach it. You know, the FCC recently has made it illegal for outbound callers and robocallers to use recorded voices or use AI. I think that's critical, right? So as we work with some of these bodies that are creating these regulations, I think as organizations that are driving what the future can look like, we have to make sure that we're aligning with these are the things that are going to be safer, but these are also the things that are going to allow us to have an exceptional experience.
Thank you, Mark. Marwan Semida at Sumsub, let's come to you next on that. How are those regulatory compliance questions can enhance fraud prevention efforts? How do you stand on that?
I would say that sticking to regulations such as AML and KYC requirements ensures that financial institutions implement the necessary checks to prevent illicit activities. Financial institutions, from my point of view, must be supported by solutions that help them to stay compliant with global and local regulations. This not only reduces the risk of legal penalties, but also builds trust between customers and partners. Compliance frameworks often include best practices for data security and fraud detection, which further enhance an institution's ability to prevent fraud.
Marwan, thank you. Eric, I know you've mentioned a little on regulatory questions so far, but is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, from a regulatory perspective, it's as simple as regulatory requirements ensure adherence to law. As a result of that, we get many benefits. Standardized procedures, improved transparency, it encourages accountability. You need to have more robust reporting to ensure that you're in compliance. And I think one of the most important things is that it promotes ethical practices, right? That is what law does for us, and that's one of the things that I love working in the financial sector, especially in a fintech where we have to balance innovation and speed of innovation with the interplay with regulatory compliance, right? It brings out the best, most robust solutions in the industry. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Eric. Let's move on to another area we've touched on a little bit, and that's customers, that's consumers. And Marwan, I'll start with you on this one. About, for you, what impact does customer or consumer education really have on reducing fraud incidents? Do you think that education is key to try and drive it down? It's easier said than done. You can put this information out there, but will it actually be listened to? Where do you stand there?
Well, I believe it plays a crucial role in reducing fraud incidents. Informed customers are less likely, definitely, to fall victims to scam attacks, right? Social engineering and other common fraud tactics as well. We must believe in empowering customers with knowledge about the latest fraud schemes and safe online practices, because financial institutions can implement also regular awareness campaigns, provide resources on recognizing fraud, and other offer tips for protecting personal information. I believe that an educated customer base serves as an additional layer of defense against fraud.
Absolutely. Let's move to you, Eric. Again, this is something we've talked about briefly earlier in the conversation. For you, what impact does it have, and how can we make sure it's done effectively to get the desired results?
Yeah, I mean, customer education is top of the risk management funnel, right? It's as simple as that. And to Marwan's point, an informed customer is step one to reducing what else comes down that funnel, right? So continuous education, continuous learning with scoped outcomes that you're looking to drive in the consumer base. Metrics matter, and I think that placed and intentional programs that are put in place to educate should have measurable outcomes. So that is important. Do things with intention in this area.
Mark, if we can come to you on that next, please.
Yep, I would agree 100%. Educated customers is the first line of defense. I would also say educated employees. So the people that are serving those customers are going to be critical as we have things happening in the organization, as we make changes to applications, the authentication methods they're going to use. But it also can become, brand improvement. If you're doing it and your competitor's not, then it's something that as an organization you can be talking to as, here's what we're doing to try to create a better experience and a safer environment for you.
Absolutely. Let's move on to collaboration now. How can collaboration between financial institutions or tech companies and so forth with law enforcement agencies enhance fraud detection? How can that communication, how can that collaboration work? Eric, we'll start with you on this. Where do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as security professionals, we want more context. We want more frictionless context as well, right? We want sharing information to be easy, high velocity, to ensure that we are, I would say, continually modifying our approach to protecting the consumer on a real-time basis as possible, right? So again, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of partnerships, collaboration in the industry, but I think it all starts with how do you do with intention to address the most valuable risks that you want to mitigate associated with your value of your organization, the value that provides, right? So do everything with intention, funnel your activities from top to bottom. And law enforcement has a place in your funnel. It might be top for me, it might be mid or bottom for others, right? So do everything with intention to enhance your value and protect your consumer.
Mark Turi, if we can come to you next on that, please.
Sure. And I think, again, one of the other layers here is collaborating with other banks and other organizations is going to be critical. Somebody's going to be first. And then having that communication with other people in the organization is important. There are two associations that we're associated with at Verizon. One is basically the banks, local and federal government, and then law enforcement. And that's the NCFTA. And the other is more banks and associations of the banks who can compare notes and look at the things that are happening. They've both been around a long time. I'll pop them into the chat window if anybody wants to see it. But I think it's giving you an association and a place to go of like-minded individuals who are trying to work through the same challenges.
Thank you, Mark. Can you just repeat the name of those organisations again in case anyone missed them, just to be belt and braces on that?
Sure. NCFTA. And then the FSISAC.
Amazing, thank you. Just for anyone who hasn't got access to the chat, just to be on the safe side. And Marwan, I'll come to you last on that. The collaboration with law enforcement, where does that fit into the picture for you?
Yeah, I will just actually add to what Eric said. So sharing information must be easy. If we say sharing information on emerging threats, suspicious activities, and confirmed fraud cases, definitely will help institutions to stay ahead of fraudsters. I believe that we must advocate for industry-wide cooperation and information sharing. Such collaboration, of course, enables quicker identification of fraud patterns and more effective distribution of criminal networks. I would say also that joint efforts in developing and enforcing anti-fraud regulations also contribute to a more secure financial ecosystem.
Thank you. And a final question I want to go into, and this really rolls up a lot of the questions we had from the audience ahead of this session. And a lot of them were about emerging technologies. What's next? What's going to be the next big thing? For all of you, what emerging types of tech really show promise in strengthening fraud prevention measures in the financial services sector? Is it just regular improvements to what we've already got, or is there another well, I'm not sure if it's a silver bullet, but something like that to really make another big splash going forward. Marwan, I'll start with you on this one. For you, what's the emerging tech that really excites you?
Actually, we kind of talked about that. I talked with Mark while we were waiting to enter. So I would say that the first thing is AI-driven analytics. I believe it holds great promise for strengthening fraud prevention in the financial service sector. I would say also advanced biometric technology, including behavioral biometrics, provide more reliable verification methods. AI-driven analytics enable real-time detection and response to the fraudulent activities.
Thank you very much indeed. Eric, we'll come to you next on this one, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a continuous evolution. Marwan said it, AI is going to be crucial in securing our future. Now, there's a lot of unknowns with AI as well, right? Do we know what challenges AI integration is going to bring inherently? I don't think we can answer that with a lot of confidence today, right? But I would say it's a continuation of everyone's on a different journey of the security journey, right? We're all in a different place, right? So whether it's biometrics or other technologies, I suspect you'll see more cloud adoption, more biometric adoption. Gen AI is going to be a theme, real-time risk analysis, and then API integration. We want more context. We got to find ways to get it. And APIs helps drive some of that, whether it's natively within our technology stacks or through a cloud service provider, where they have APIs natively baked within their product solution to provide enhanced value. So I think it's a continuation with some AI as well.
Thank you, Eric, and we'll give the final word on the panel to this to you, Mark Turi at Verizon. What are your thoughts on that? What is the emerging technology that's really exciting you?
So I think just building on what Marwan and Eric said, I think AI is going to be one of the key factors. I do think multi-factor authentication going beyond just a single, here's what we're going to do with facial reco or voice reco, multi-factor is key and critical. But I also think it's important for people to be honest on where they are in the maturity model, right? And I think that's a starting point rather than going to the end state. Where do I fit as an organization, and how can I move up the stack and get better? If I got to get to multi-factor authentication, great. But if I don't have any of the other previous items that allow me to have tech in here to make it more secure, then maybe I start there first.
Yeah, a degree of humility is always essential in any kind of successful strategy. Well, I think that's a great place for us to round up. We've covered an extraordinary amount of ground in sort of 35, 40 minutes or so. So Eric Hussey at Finastra, Mark Turi at Verizon, and Marwan Semida at Sumsub. Thank you so much for joining us here at FinTech Live New York. Really enjoyed your thoughts and your insight on this whole subject.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.